Thank you so much, Emily, for being in our very first Artist Eat Ice Cream remote virtual ice cream eating sessions. We both have our ice cream with us. Beautiful. Love that. To get started, if you could just give a little introduction to yourself and your work in your own words.
Yeah, I usually say that I'm an artist who uses uh, you know, installation, textiles, and performance to talk about sort of the relationships between labor, craft, and queer futurity.
Yeah, that I feel like that sums up all of the highlights of the stuff I know about you. Um, this is a little bit of an atypical Artist Eat Ice Cream, I think, in the sense that like we're obviously quarantined and social distancing and we're not together. And so I feel like that's a really good place for us to start. And I wondered if you could just speak about how it feels for you to be an artist in the world right now. Like what is going through your head? Are you making work? Do you feel a responsibility to make work? Just how is it going?
I'm making work. Um, I simultaneously, I feel very grateful that like the kind of work that I do, you know, especially right now I'm making a lot of quilts, because that's kind of what I have the space for. And it's an art form that was originally supposed to be something that's made kind of like in a domestic space, kind of piecemeal, like not necessarily knowing or like having space to sort of even lay out the full work while you're working on it. So working on it bit by bit to make this larger thing out of materials that you can sort of find around your home. And so I feel very like lucky and blessed to sort of like have an art practice at all. Like it's a very like lucky thing. And I definitely know people who like their thing that they like to do is, rock climbing or basically things that are like not possible in this current situation. And I feel very lucky that I have something that I can do and that I have a practice that I can do that kind of was already intended to be made in this kind of setting.
Um, Kind of going back into the subjects and themes that run throughout your work, a lot of the work that you do and the mediums that you occupy, like we're talking about now, using fabrics. You also do a lot with food, and a lot of kind of like cooking and baking are really central to what your art practice is. And a lot of that work has been gendered and also kind of like dismissed by the art world and considered kind of under this realm of like craft. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit about how the historical implications of those labels and dismissals maybe influence the content of the work that you're doing itself, because the theme of a lot of your work also kind of addresses concepts of labor and community.
We think we want to kind of feel like we're past that marginalization of communities and materials, but I think that um it's tough, and it's also people get very fixated on like romanticizing this idea of like, oh my god, it's this handmade thing. And I always, especially because I've done a lot of like residencies and things that are kind of public facing and having conversations with people about textile work. And on the one hand, there's this really beneficial thing of like, because textiles are not put up on a pedestal in the way that say oil painting is, people actually feel more comfortable talking about it, which I really love, because they're like, oh, my grandma used to do beading, or I do this or whatever.
Mhm.
So I love that part of it. But it's also, there's this other half of it that's like romanticizing things that are handmade. Whereas like, we don't think about the fact that like our phones and computers and all this stuff are like, many parts of these things are made by hand,
Mhm.
just by people who don't live in the US and whose labor we want to kind of erase. And so I think that it's important. And also I think there's a lot of confusion about like a lot of people think that I hire people to like make parts of my work. And that's like, number one, I'm a young artist, I can't afford that. And number two, it's like me doing all of the stuff is and the labor is a part of this kind of like a meditative, practice that's about ideas of accessing a future or like accessing the divine.
What we want to do with all of these as we end is to ask everyone that we're speaking to if they have 3 things that they can share with us and with each other that have maybe been bringing them joy in this moment.
I recently watched Fiddler on the Roof for the first time ever, and it's amazing and brings me so much happiness.
I've never seen it either. I
Oh,
really watched
it's also just so much. There are many relevant topics
it. Mm.
about a changing world and changing your mind and migration. It's great. Also, I mean, not to be like movie TV show, but general like Star Trek has been like a wonderful I don't know, speaking of like windows into a potential future. So Star Trek Next Gen, with my best friend, I'm starting Star Trek Next Generation, and we're like watching it while sort of FaceTime with each other. And then I, by myself, am sort of at the very end of watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine, which is, I don't know, it's just fantastic and like a wonderful, everybody has like good intentions and there are moral quandaries and the costume design is really great. So general Star Trek universe has been giving me a lot of joy. And then I've been really into just cooking and baking and making things, trying to make things that I wouldn't normally make sort of outside of quarantine. And also, I mean, just generally like making pasta.